everyone. Hi, this is Paul Casey, Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame educational video series, where we talk about Kenpo principles. We discuss sometimes forms, techniques. We're very happy when we have special guests, including our Hall of Fame members. I'll introduce a few of those to you tonight. And then we'll talk about some things that may present themselves as problems in our Kenpo Karate journey of instruction, maybe with our students. So with no further ado, it is really exciting to see some of the people that are here. Some of our Hall of Fame men that we have today. I'm very excited to see Darwin Jones. Hello, Darwin, welcome. Good to see you. How's Mr. Demick?
Here, let me, okay. You know what, he's doing very well. Like I mentioned earlier, we have sessions every week, and we have for, well, since 1965. So,
well, we're happy to have you here, sir. Thank you so very much. Always my favorite guy to go to at times, my dad, my Kenpo dad here, Grandmaster Chuck Sullivan. Hello, Chuck. How are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself, Paul?
Excellent. Especially you're here. You're going to bring it. You're going to make it real. That's going to be fun.
Okay. Keep it real.
We're going to move on right now. One of my favorite guys that is one of the most innovative thinkers right now in the martial arts. He continues in the theme of Mr. Parker's writings, all the way up from the northwest side of our country. Would you please give a warm welcome to Hall of Fame member, Mr. Todd Durgan.
Sir, gentlemen, thank you for having me.
It's good to have him, Todd, here. Now we have some newbies here, which is exciting because it's always a pleasure to welcome other people to come on. And with no further ado, let me introduce them. One of the gentlemen that I haven't seen in a long, long time, have great respect for him. He was on my black belt test 40 years ago, this past Tuesday, and all the way from Long Beach. Give a warm welcome to our friend, Eddie Booz. Hello, Eddie.
Hello. How you doing?
Excellent. It's so nice to see you again.
Yeah,
it is really, truly a pleasure.
Seeing that picture really brought back a lot of memories.
Yeah, there was a lot of people on. That was a historic moment. Actually, that was a perfect Kenpo moment.
Yeah, it was.
I mean,
definitely, it was.
I mean, you saw such enthusiasm. It was just a positive message. And then sadly, a lot of the individuals that you see in that picture from 1981 are no longer with us.
Yeah, I know.
You know, but we will live through them, and they will live through us, through their teachings and our experience and our stories. Let's move on to a few other people. I'm very excited to welcome Max. Hello, Max. How you doing down there? Good?
Doing good. Thank you for having me here. Always a pleasure.
Max is one of the most knowledgeable men in the Kenpo world. He studies directly with Huck Plantis, and he always brings to the conversation a nice, interesting twist that we might not think about. So I'm excited to hear what Max has to say in a few minutes. Welcoming for the first time here tonight, excited to see Jerry Smith. Jerry Smith is one of the leading pioneers in the martial arts. He's also a fellow Marine, like our friend Chuck Sullivan. Jerry Smith, how are you tonight, sir?
I am just fine, man. I'm like the cat on the screen door. I'm hanging on for dear life.
Well, I'm glad you're holding on to Chuck Sullivan's screen door and not mine. And we're going to welcome a couple of new people here. Tim is all the way down from, Tim, I'm not exactly what part of the country you're in, but you work with Dave Hebler, correct?
I'm Dave Hebler's talent manager, and I'm producing a film called The King's Bodyguard as we speak, which is the story of Dave's life and times as Elvis Presley's personal martial arts instructor and bodyguard, and the fifth person awarded a black belt under Ed Parker, and his influence with Bruce Lee, and how Bruce Lee more or less he helped Bruce Lee segue in the role as Kato in the Green Hornet, because Dave was there in the beginning of Ed Parker's tournament, Long Beach Internationals, 1964. And Dave Hebler actually helped establish the rules for the first tournament that Ed Parker put on.
Well, thank you for being here, Tim. Actually, I don't know if you know Chuck Sullivan. Chuck is Dave's senior, and they came on in as Mr. Parker's first black belts. Am I correct on that, Mr. Sullivan?
I have a lot of respect for Mr. Sullivan. I will say that he has taught me a lot already in the short time I've known him. And one of the things I'm doing is when Dave Hebler did a book called The Elvis Experience, he self-published the book. I work with literary agents. So what we're doing is we're actually having a publishing deal for Dave's book, but we're revamping it, calling it The King's Bodyguard. And Grandmaster Sullivan actually provided us a foreword to the book. We're going to use that in the book. So
hopefully we'll be able to have Mr. Hebler and you come back on sometime when that actually comes to fruition with the movie and the other projects that come. So today, do you have any experience at all, Tim, with in the martial arts?
Yes, in fact, I actually trained 25 years in the martial arts. My base style was an Okinawan style called Shorei Goju-Ryu. It was part Kenpo, part Shotokan. I did Tang Sudo, Taekwondo, Judo, and Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay, thank you. Well, then this will be very important for you to jump in here when you get a chance. Give us your thoughts, your input. I know there's a few more people that are coming on. I'm hoping they'll come on soon. We have with us Veron. How are you?
Hey,
Thank
I'm doing great. How are you doing
I know
tonight?
you're one of Mr. Sullivan's students.
Yeah, I'm one of Senior Grandmaster Chuck Sullivan's students. I'm in the Maryland area, right outside Washington, D.C.
Wow,
Maryland,
we're
you
going to
can't
keep
be
you
in
up tonight,
Maryland.
aren't we? It's a little
Say
bit
it
of
one more
like a
time.
difference in time there.
They can't be
Little
in
bit different,
Maryland.
yeah.
I'm already in Maryland.
Anyway, it's good to have you here. Thank you very much, and we really appreciate your participation. One of the
Thanks for having me.
greats in our Kenpo's history is the Hibbin name. The Hibbins are legendary. Their father, Gil, is one of my favorite all-time people. He was the creator of the famous Parker knife for his thesis in 1968. And we are honored to have his son, Wes, here. Hello, Wes. How you doing?
Doing good. How you doing?
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on, and maybe we'll get a chance to have you, give us some ideas of what you think about tonight and some impact. Right now, we're bringing on, I believe,
It was
one of my guys that I grew up in Pasadena. I don't know if we spent more time on the mat or getting into trouble. And if he can take off his mute, I'm very excited. It's been a while since I've seen him. That is Mr. Steve Orsino. Steve, are you there?
Yeah, I am here. Hey, how's you guys going? I'm just trying to get my other thing fixed here.
Your other thing fixed.
Oh my audio is not quite working the way it should.
Well, that's all right. You're the Mr. Tech. He does some great videos. I remember when we've had things in the past. He paid a beautiful tribute to Frank Trejo 3 years ago with a video that it was a collage of Frank's life. And I'm really honored to see Steve here tonight. He's a very knowledgeable practitioner. Plus, he also offers a lot with his expertise. Hello, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm
How's your
alive
wife
and kicking, man. Everybody's good. We're all vaccinated and all that stuff. Hey, Max, how's it going?
Hey, brother, how are you?
Well, it's good to see you here. So let's get into this. Right now, we're going to be talking about Kenpo. Kenpo's principles, we're going to talk about it, but I'm going to give some quotes first before I go any further. And I always like to reference 3 or 4 people that are influential in our martial arts guide. And the first one I'm going to use is Lao Tzu. The best fighter is never angry. The best fighter is never angry. I know Mr. Sullivan will talk about that shortly. You can only fight the way you practice. You can only fight the way you practice. Miyamoto Musashi. You're free to choose, but you are not free from the consequences of your choice. The consequences of your choice. Sun Tzu. Finally, the last one I'm going to use is the founding Grandmaster Ed Parker. And it's really simple. And I think this is the first lesson I ever learned from Frank. I've had many discussions with Steve on it. And Mr. Parker said, you will discover that through your training, that your mind is the most important part that needs to be developed. And that is a direct quote from Kenpo Karate, The Law of the Fist in Empty Hand, Ed Parker, 1960. So the first tool we have to learn is how to use our mind. So let's get right into it, Max. How do you prepare yourself for your training when we're dealing with an unknown commodity? 3, 4 guys in the alley that came out after you're leaving your restaurant. What are you going to do?
Well, you have to fight, but with respect to the curriculum, and this is, I just talked about this. I taught a class earlier this afternoon. You know, that's what I do. I'll leave the restaurant. When I go to the other restaurant, I'll stop by and work with my guys and then, you know, move on. But we talked about this, and we kind of, it came up as far as like the two-man techniques and their relevance and their, somebody asked me, they said, do you think, they're practical? Do you think they'll help you in the mass attack? And I said, well, even base moves, against one man, one attacker are not going to happen in ideal phase. We all know they're training tools, show the rules and principles and concepts. And, to me, the two-man techniques are like the two-punch techniques. They're not new techniques. They're ways to show you how to use your one-punch techniques, rather, to make them against two punches, or a punch and a kick, or a kick and a kick, etc. So mass attacks, our techniques are basically the same thing. If you go through the techniques, you can clearly see that they're made up of bits and pieces of our one-man techniques. And the important concept that I think that the two-man techniques are kind of towards the end of the curriculum, and I think that's what should be almost like a black belt thesis for every student. Once they get through the ideal phase, they get to the two-man techniques, and we have scenarios that are very idealistic. Twin shoulder grabs, from the sides and from the front. One grabs, the other one punches. And I tell people, it doesn't take a genius to realize that there's a lot of things missing. It could be one guy from the side, one from the front, or could be two from the side, one from the front, etc. Could be a weapon involved. There's many factors. So the multiple attack techniques as we have them are just a way for you to start thinking about the environment, about the awareness, about, the footwork involved in the multiple attack scenario. And one of the things that I love about the two-man techniques that they show you is we never finish a technique, and we certainly don't do any extensions in it. So that's a clear statement of reality. So you are not going to do 37 moves. You will just not be able to do that. So you see demos where people do, 37 moves in one guy, then the other, then the other. So this will never happen. If it does, I'll be very surprised. Realistically, they're all going to jump you, and you're going to have to hit hard and fast and be able to hit multiple directions to have a chance to survive. It's clear, when you see people do demos, who's been in fights and who hasn't, what I call fantasy Kenpo.
Yep.
If I could have it my way, I would love to see it this way. Well, it's never going to happen. Real fighting is ugly, dirty, it's mean, and like I tell people, especially unless you're a super conditioned athlete, you're going to run out of air. So you got to have hard and fast and furious and get the job done and start dropping people. And this is where, through common sense, like Mr. Parker used to say, through time, experience, and logic, knowledge of what is useful and useless will become apparent. Mm-hmm. And training like this, where you have some pressure, and a lot of schools like Krav Maga and everything, they do that. They wear you out, and then they put you in, and you fight one guy, then the other, then you fight multiple guys. And you realize that a lot of the finesse and, stuff that you see people do with this quarter beat, hop, jump, turn their back, all this fancy stuff that you see Kenpo people do, it will never happen. You have to go back to basics, hard and fast and furious, and give it its all and start dropping people. Because the longer you go, the more the odds will be against you, because there's more of them than you, and you'll run out of steam. So to me, the two-man techniques are a good way to introduce the mind again, and that depends on the instructor. Some people, you see demos and people never are even close to hit the person. The other guy, grabs their shoulder and just stands there, and you punch their buddy, and the guy's just standing there waiting for you to get to them. And I said again, completely unrealistic. People grab you, to hold you there while the other guy beats the tar out of you or whatever. They're not just going to stand there, and do nothing. But that again depends on the instructor and their level of understanding of realism. But I think two-man techniques, that's what I would want to see more in black belt tests. You test for black belt, okay, you can do the forms, you can do the extensions, all this stuff, that's good. But do spontaneous attacks, realistic attacks, a little bit, I mean, you cannot do full realism, but to do multiple attacks, but with intent. I was just talking to my guys today, we were working, intercepting the ram. And I said, remember, this guy is trying to put you on your butt. He's coming in hard and fast, charging. He doesn't just bend over, put his hands out and wait for you to beat him up. You have to have your angular, the body mechanics, you have to have your structural integrity, you have to have your bracing angle set. And if you're not training for that, you're just wasting your time, because the first time you try to do it on the street, you're going to be on your butt and, in the world of trouble. So two-man techniques, they just emphasize that problem tenfold, because with every person that's thrown into the equation, it's not +1, it's multiplied by it, because you have that many more factors now, variables to consider to defend against. It's hard enough to fight one person when you don't know what's coming. Because
thank you,
again,
Max. I really appreciate your input. I'm glad I didn't qualify that was the delivery man showing up.
He delivered.
He did,
Yeah.
but Max did. Let's get real
Yeah.
right now. I'm going to go to one of my Marines. Hey, Jerry,
Yes,
your
sir.
thoughts. You got to deal with multiple attackers. How is
Well-
that going to work out for you?
Well, let me, I think that I can, I have some insight. When I got back from the Marine Corps, I was stationed in Long Beach. Now, a lot of you who live over there and been down there, this was during the time of the Pike, and there was the Marines and sailors. My job was I eventually became a naval investigator, and I was connected to an apprehension unit in the brig. So it was my job to bring back people who didn't want to go back, So when it comes to talking about multiple attacks, I fought in bars, man. I fought my way out of, in those bars in Long Beach, the Filipino bars. If you went into the bar, what they would do is they would start a fake fight. They'd start a fake fight, and then all of a sudden, all of the glasses, all of the bottles, all of the cheers was coming at you. So being a naval investigator and an MP, it was our job to go in and break up the fight and take people back. The mindset for fighting multiple people is life and death. You can't go into a fight and it has to be. If a fight, now some of you may disagree with me. If a fight can't be over in 2 or 3 seconds, if you can't take a guy out, take an eye out, break a nose, you're gonna get killed. So I always thought fighting was life or death for me, because I fought in bars. I'd take guys back who didn't want to go back. But mindset is really, really important, because it's not pretty fighting. Just as the gentleman before me said, it's serious. But I found that if you can't end a fight within 2 or 3, I'd say less than a half a minute, forget about it. And I fought my way out of bars, out of bathrooms, and took my man back. 2 guys against a bar of crazy people. So I don't know if that.
Well, let's do some analysis.
But Paul, let me tell you this.
Yes, sir.
Let me tell you this. When I came back, I was a mortarman, and I had to go out into counter mortar fire and fire back, dropping bombs. 13 months of that. When I came back, man, I was suffering from some serious post-traumatic stress. I didn't know what that was, because it didn't exist then. But if I wasn't in a fight, if I wasn't fighting, I didn't feel like I was alive. I was really messed up when I came back. Worked out to my advantage, but it took a while for me to get to a point to where I settled down, got married, and was normal again. So I was chosen to do what I did because I was effective doing it. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's go over to a technical side and get to Todd Durgan. Stress multiple attacks, and do you use the basic techniques as drills, or are they essential, or have you expanded on them? What are your thoughts?
So interestingly, both gentlemen hit it on the head. The first thing you have to do is be mentally prepared, in my opinion. So the mental preparation, and in today's dojo, in today's commercial dojo, today mental preparation is a hard thing to acquire, because you cannot physically stress a student without being sued. It's important element of all of it, regardless of technique, basics, you name it, is the mental preparation. And so, you know, doing techniques in a technique line is great. Doing two-man techniques is great. Those are tools to teach you about the principles of motion and the physics of combat, and how interaction works, how you interact with a human being. But when you go into combat and you're being attacked by one or two or more people, and let's be honest, you do not know what their intentions are. And so your intention should be to survive, and your intention to survive should include at all costs. And so if it's an eyeball, a broken leg, or whatever, the next thing you have to do is be physically prepared. And that's where the techniques come in, the two-man techniques and so forth. And interestingly, you know, Max pointed out that they don't finish. The two-man techniques do not finish one technique and then move into another technique. They cross over, they go back and forth, and you do a couple things to this guy, you do a couple things to this guy, but you never put yourself in position where while you're doing something to one person, you're exposed, overly exposed, or readily overexposed to the other person. So you're learning how to juxtaposition and maintain angles of strategy and angles of offense and defensive retaliation.
Todd, do you practice any of the improvising type of multi-attack scenarios?
So in my system that I teach, I have mass attack scenarios that we practice, that the student practices from white belt all the way through. The belt level techniques are incorporated into a mass attack scenario, and we do them from the first three techniques a student gets. They have people actually attacking them. We start out with a gentle, loving attack, and then eventually it turns into a little more stressful. The difference, though, and I have to point out, is that you know, when you get into an actual attack and combat scenario, your targets should change. They should become absolutely focused on targets that are going to, as Mr. Smith said, knock somebody down and out right now, not in 5 more strikes. So 5 swords, great technique, but your first 2 shots, or your first shot, should be the last shot, and you should be, anything after that is something on their way down, or, you know, you left it for the next guy. And Max hit it too. Again, I think he left. Oh no, he's still there. You know, you're going to run out of gas. You're just, so part of the physical preparation is, guess what? Conditioning.
So the mental and physical conditioning are paramount to your training.
Paramount. You won't make it if you have one but not the other. I should take that back. If you have good mental conditioning and some physical conditioning, you might make it. But if you have no mental conditioning and some physical conditioning, you will not make it unless you get lucky and you run fast.
Let's go to somebody that really teaches the real deal. Chuck Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, how are you?
Wonderful.
Okay, your thoughts. How do you prepare? How do you teach?
Well, for one thing, again, the mental state is all important. And I think what everybody's neglected to mention so far is you got to be first. You have to be first. When you have multiple people, whether it's 2 or more, you got to take one of them out right now. And there's only 2 places you're going to do that, from the eyes and the groin. So that person is gone immediately. That's one person out of the equation. Now, if you only got 2, well, you only have one more to deal with. And if there's more than that, I tell you, years ago, we used to do 2-on-1 just, you know, in the dojo. And this is back before Rich Montgomery got his black belt. So I'm going way, way, way back before the first guy was promoted. He did a move that I thought was absolutely brilliant. He stepped between two guys and he backfisted them both at the same time. And he was on the other side of him. And I saw that and my heart fluttered. I got to tell you, it just, wow, that was just so incredible. A couple of weeks later, it was my turn. And I stepped between two guys and I backfisted them both at the same time. Just as one of them came in with a roundhouse kick, I was dropped flat on my face. So experience is the best teacher. But as Mark Twain said, it's a wise man who picks it up secondhand.
Yeah.
So by telling you this, don't step between two people, even if you think you got a good shot for it. No, the paramount thing, of course, I think is you got to get rid of one of them right away. I've seen, or I'm sorry, I haven't seen, because I put it this way: I can run faster scared than you can mad. So I'm out of there before Quick can get ready. So I don't have to worry about fighting. I'm just gone. I'll evaporate. But if I have to, of course, you got to do what you got to do. But I'm going to get as nasty as I possibly can. I'm going for groins and eyes, and that's, if they're blind or they're crippled, that's their fault, not mine.
You know, Chuck, it's the old fable between the rabbit and the fox and who's going to live. And honestly, you know, when we're doing one-on-one, we have a better understanding of how to gauge it. But when there's more than one individual, when it gets to 2 and 3 and 4 people, the stakes have been changed. That means they mean business, and I mean business now. So it's time for you to call in their markers real quickly.
Yeah.
And all the time I've seen Ed Parker work, it was quick. 3 moves and he was on to the next guy as fast as he could possibly be.
You know, the fallacy, of course, of the mass attack that Ed Parker always wound up his demonstrations with is exactly that, a fallacy. I mean, here you've got 6 guys. One of them attacks and he takes care of him, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth, then the sixth. That's not reality. Mm-hmm. Reality is 3 of them jump on you and then 3 more jump on them. That's reality. So what happened? I got to tell you this because it's classic. One of the international championships, Ed did his famous demonstration, and he's got his 6 attackers. And of course, you never wanted to be last or next to last, because that's when he started to wing it. The first 2 or 3 people, he'd kind of stick to the script, and from then on, it was like Katie bar the door, because he just started moving. And I got a bruise one time from my hip to my knee. From him, just it was a kick, but I was bruised. Literally, I know his foot isn't that long. My thigh is, and my whole thigh was bruised from that one kick. Well, what happened on this particular one, I forget which year it was. It was up on the riser. I remember that. Everybody attacked him. Well, Johnny Walker, Big John Walker, who is no longer with us, he got cut off by somebody else. Somebody, you know, went down in front of him or whatever, and he was the last man to attack Ed Parker. Well, everybody was down, and it was just Johnny and Ed looking at each other, and the audience is like, "What now?" And Johnny went, and he laid down on the ground. The audience were nuts. But that's reality. I mean, like I said, 3 or 4 people, you're hitting one and they're grabbing your arm, you're hitting him, or you're looking at hitting all of a sudden you get to know. It's again, I can run faster scared than you can angry.
I'm going to move over
with anger.
Yeah, I'm going to move on to a hypothetical in a second, and I'm going to have Mr. Sullivan come back to deal with that. But before we do, I want to go to one of my favorite people. It's been a while since he's been on, and I'm glad to see Derek Hibben is here. Hello, Derek. How are you?
Hello, everybody.
Derek actually has hands-on experience dealing with a multiple attack. So what happened there, Derek? Reality check.
In real life, you don't have time to think. All of this stuff that you see in movies where they come at you one at a time doesn't happen. The old kung fu movies where they wait, or even the analogy that we've all been taught and or, you know, Uncle Huck, my father, you don't have that time. Sometimes you do. And if you do, it's like, okay, you know, Huck would say, who's the ringleader? My dad would be like, who's the big guy? Who's the biggest guy? Drop him, you know, get his attention. As far as teaching, it would go as, you know, always have change in your hands or keys in your pocket, whatever. Throw something up to distract them, and just, you've got one move, that's it. Sigong Labounty, rest in peace. Stuff that we worked on, even in the line in Pasadena, was like, you don't have time to pull off an attack. You don't have time to pull off even a defense. They're coming at you. You have one move, make it count. Doesn't matter if it's a block, a strike, which are the same. It doesn't matter. You have one move and then it's on to the next. I've dealt with and survived, luckily, real life jump attacks where 10 or more people have tried to bum rush me and jump me at one time. I've also conditioned myself, my body, my mind. Some people may have been through this. I know my brother Wes can contest to this, that being in a modern day type mosh pit scenario, that like, it's not slam dancing. Some of these guys are out there to take your head off. And there isn't time to think or react. And you have to rely on your basics, your tools. If you're in a situation that you can put yourself between you and something else, then good. But 9 out of 10 times, you don't. You have no idea what's going to happen. You have to swing for the fences. And like Mr. Sullivan said, the gloves come off. That's where you go for the targets that we're taught. You go for the eyes, you go for the throat, you go for the groin, you go for these soft tissue targets. Instead of trying to pull off 5 swords on somebody, it's like, no, instead of blocking, I'm gonna parry or check this, and I'm gonna hit straight to the throat or down on the bridge of the nose, and it's to the next guy. And if that guy gets up, let him come again. But it's bang, 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 bang. And sometimes, as he was saying, with that double back knuckle at the same time, I've done that with elbows, even with a spinning kick at the same time. And it has saved my life. And there's no way to prepare for this. You can't teach this, which is why we used to do a thing called the Ring of Fire. Everybody's called it something else, whether it's bull in the middle, this, that, or whatever. You as the instructor goes around and gives everybody a number, and you shout it out, and the person in the middle is just kind of like tapping their feet and waiting for that person to come to them. But instead, to train for this for real life, you can't yell out a number, because then that heightens the awareness of the person in the middle and is a falsery. That gives them read time. In real life, you don't have it. You don't have it. You have to react. And the only way to train for it is to do it for real.
Yeah, it's funny, with Frank, we did that in Pasadena a few times, and he started off with numbers, and then after that, he started adding numbers. One was not just 1, it was 1 and 4, or 2 and 6. And then he had 2, 7, 3, and then he just said, everybody. You were, we laugh about it now, but there wasn't enough room to you try to do something, get out of it. Let me go over to Eddie. Eddie Booz, how are you, sir?
Paul, how are you?
Good. Okay, sir, you've been around a long time. You've trained with Chuck. You personally trained with Mr. Parker for 10 years. You're one of my favorite guys. I know who you are. They should know who you are. Give us your insights into this discussion.
Well, listening to all these gentlemen, they're all right. They all know, and they all are given the right things, but there is no easy way to train for something like this. And I have some personal experience with some altercations. Believe me, it really breaks down to basics. Forget about trying to do a full technique. It's not going to happen because nothing is going to be perfect. And attitude is everything. attitude, speed, power, and accuracy, and follow through. I had an in-depth discussion with Mr. Parker about this. And it was like, if you can't run away and you got to fight, if you can have a weapon, fine. Anything can be a weapon. But first, try to run away. You want to save yourself, run away. But if you're forced to fight, I reserve the right to have a preemptive strike. I'll strike first. And everybody is correct. You got to go for the targets that mean something. It's not sparring. It's not playing in the studio. And fights unfold as they unfold. You might get to one spot and everything changes. You know, it's not, but there's a saying, if you're 4 moves into it, you're losing. Think about that. So it's really based upon basics. Myself, I mean, that's been my experience with having to use martial arts. And it doesn't have to be pretty, it has to be effective.
Interesting you say that, because you're 3 moves into it. How long does it take to do 3 moves? A second or so?
A couple seconds. But you have to remember, the way they used to do techniques is different than what they do now. Everybody wants to start and run to the end. Run fast as they can, but try to get everything in they can. But in the beginning, they did them a little bit slower and they were more precise.
Mm-hmm.
They were on target, because if you're not on target, you're wasting the motion. Everybody needs to think more about it. You have to be able to take a little bit, because you're not getting out of it without getting hurt. You know, so that's part of the training too. That's why we do higher levels. We do, you know, training with more than one person at a time, or you don't know what's going to happen. We play those games to sharpen our skills. But when the fight unfolds, more than likely it's going to boil down to basics. And if you can get something between you and them, because I mean, to me, mass attack is 2 people. Okay. Not me and him, but him and somebody else and me.
Yeah, there's always going to be that certain person that's hiding in the wings. And we're going to go to Darwin about that. Thank you so much, Ed. Darwin.
Hey, you're welcome.
Okay, I'm here.
Give us your thoughts on that, Darwin.
Well, I concur with everybody. Has a real good idea of reality. And I'm not sure if it was Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali quote, everybody has a plan until they get hit. So we train a bit differently now, even when we do forms. I know it's going to sound well, anyways, we make up the form as we do it on the spot. Your mind is clicking. And then later on, when we're done with the form, we reflect on what we've just done. Self-defense techniques. Who here in a tournament or classroom sparring has done thundering hammers? 5 swords? You don't. It's freestyle, and it's right now. You have to be in the moment right now. So we've put together combination moves, just maybe 2 or 3 moves, and we don't put names to them because we don't want to memorize something like a technique, because then again you're falling into that category of pre-programming a situation, a real situation. And I've been in a few. It's right now. If you have time to think, then you have time to get hit. You're just reacting. It's all about your instincts, I feel. You're reacting to the moment right now. Not about your next move. It's right now.
Darwin, have you any ground experience? Have you trained a little bit on any ground work, grappling and things like that?
You know what? Funny you should say that. We try our best now to set up a defense for people that are trying to get our front leg and take us down or to get a hold of us. So we use a series of shuffles and different moves to try to avoid that, because at least with Kenpo training, we're not really ground fighters. So we do our best work if we're on our feet, I believe.
You're training right now, Steve Racino. Steve, why don't you come on and let's talk about that? I know Steve has a background in Filipino martial arts as well, so he's going to come from that perspective. Steve, your thoughts on mass attack?
Run. I mean, Mr. Sullivan said the right thing. You run. If you can't run, then you follow through with the other gentleman that already said, but almost beating a dead horse. We pretty much all are in agreement on how we need to deal with a multiple attack. You want to avoid it, but if you have to, you can't avoid it, then you got to take it to them. And
let's introduce something to you that you're very proficient in. The use, okay, you got two people there. Okay, a third one shows up and you're looking at this. Now the stakes have been raised, but that third one pulls out the knife. Okay, and you're not and that is a factor we have to look at, guys, that these are not compliant dummies or training partners. These are real life people wanting to kick ass and hurt people. Steve, what do you deal with? How do you deal with that? How would you deal with them?
They have a knife. I don't. I run faster. I mean, let's not be stupid about this. I mean, that's like going to a gunfight. You have a gun and they have a knife, or vice versa. No, it doesn't work that way. They got a knife. You need to X-nay and get out of there. But if you can't, then you're gonna have to do the best you can. And the Hibbins here, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's not. It's gonna get messy, and it's not about winning. At that point, it's just about surviving.
I think one of the things that we learned in some of our techniques, and obviously when you and I were coming up, it was the green belt techniques. There was 10 of them. The first 5 were for grabs, and the other were combinations. I think in the combinations and even in the grabs, you start utilizing the opponents against one another. In other words, you injure one of them and then you use them as a shield to hopefully deflect or delay them in responding so that you can get out of there.
Well, definitely strategy-wise, you want to position yourself so you've got them in front of you. You've got one in front of the other, something like that. Of course, you want to do that. You also want to really pay attention to your environmental weapons. I mean, like a weapon or no weapon. If one of my students years ago said, what would happen if there was an altercation, there was a stick on the ground. I'm picking it up. He goes, well, is that dirty fighting? I said, nope. It's about some winning. So I'm sorry, but I'm picking the stick up, because if I don't, he will. So,
it's funny you say that. I had a conversation today with Joe Rebello, and he was giving me a little bit of a history lesson, History Joe, as I call him. And he was telling us the history of Kenpo, and it was considered to be dirty fighting from the Chinese perspective. And when you think about it, it's a very, very combative system. It's brutal. And when you get to it, I'm going to go to Tim in a second. We're going to give a scenario. Tim has experience in ground training as well as grappling and whatnot. So here's the scenario, guys. And you have 4 individuals. You have a boxer. You have a jiu-jitsu. You have an MMA. And you just have a street fighter. Guy grew up in the gangs of Southern California on the barrio streets. Okay? You're involved in an attack and all that. Tim, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with those scenarios?
By having peripheral vision all around you, you can see from which angle the attacker is coming at you in, waiting for that attacker to fully commit themselves and then react to whatever they give you. Look for that opening and react and take advantage of that opening. That's what I do. If I have multiple attackers, Mr. Sullivan, Grandmaster Sullivan, has taught me, instead of trying to fight one at a time. I was always taught to back myself in the corner or fight out of that corner so nobody can get around me, around my back, fight out of that corner, one person at a time. Instead of doing that, Grandmaster Sullivan's taught me to fight all of them at a time. So I've got to adapt what I was learned in Shorei Goju-Ryu and Jiu-Jitsu to fight multiple attackers at once instead of fighting one at a time. For me, that's the difference from what Kenpo, you guys do in Kenpo, from what I was trained in, the various styles I trained in. I always want to fight multiple attackers one at a time, but it's fighting multiple at a time. But for me personally, just looking for the opening and trying to make sure that I can get out of what position I'm put in through escape holds or pressure points or submissions, joint locks, hammer locks, ground and pound, basically, you know, because I was also a professional wrestler for 9 years. So I believe in the ground and pound. If you get somebody, you get them on, you get on top of somebody, do not let them up until they are they're out for the count. You can sit there and Judge Mills Lane can go 1, 2, 3, 10. You're 10, you're done. But you know, you have to fully commit yourself. When you commit yourself fully, you got to keep going until your opponent is just out, you know. So it doesn't matter if it's one person or 4 people.
Well, I disagree with you on that, and I'll tell you why. I don't care if you're the boxer Mike Tyson, you're one of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, you're one of the top winning MMA guys, or you're the street fighting thug that was in gangs. Once you have more than one person involved in the equation and you try to go to the ground with the ground person, those other 2 or 3 guys are going to jump on you and use your head as a soccer ball. Mike Tyson gets taken down. He's one of the baddest men in the world, but he's going to have a hell of a time when he's dealing with a bunch of street thugs that all of a sudden decide to pull out a knife and start stabbing him. You get the MMA guy, and he's used to rules. So the guy that really is the one we should pattern ourselves after is somebody that came out of the streets of Hawaii that realized street fighting was for real, and that was Ed Parker. And I think we go to Mr. Sullivan to talk about it. By putting ourselves against the wall, we've eliminated an option, and we never want to give the opponents that opportunity to think, oh, well, he just took away that option by moving against the wall. So we know he can't go backwards. He can only go forward, sideways, or he has to go through us. Right from that, let's talk about that. Derek, what do you think?
Most Kenpoists really focus on, and I think really miss the point of, and I had to learn this through cross training, and Mr. Orsino can, I believe, attest to this. In a knife fight, there's 3 rules. 1, you're gonna bleed. 2, so am I. 3, I'm gonna make sure you bleed more. The only difference between us standing and being up against the wall or on the ground is our feet. All the same principles, all the same laws, all the same, anything that we do apply. The only difference is the plane that you are working on, okay? All of our joint lock manipulations, this, that, or whatever, this is why it is imperative to cross-train. Through doing Dose Pares, Pakiti Terja, Sistema, Kenpo, all the arts that I have been blessed to have trained in my entire life. Nothing will prepare you for anything unless you are ready to prepare for anything. Does that make sense? Because you have to be the one. As Mr. Sullivan even said, sometimes there used to be the old adage, and this is from back in the day of the samurai, he who moves first dies. But sometimes you have to be the one that strikes first. And you have to strike hard, fast, quick, and move on to the next person. You want to call, if people want to call Kenpo a dirty street art, this, that, or whatever, if we're in a pool hall or a bar, if there's a beer bottle, a pool ball, a pool cue, if I've got 2 knives on me or a gun, guess what? I'm going to use the tools that I have. And that's just being real. It doesn't matter what it is. If you attack me, my brother, and my father in our shop, I promise you, not only are you going to catch hands and fists, you're going to catch hammers, wrenches, anything that's between you and me. I'll grab a stranger and throw them between you and I to survive. It's called survival. especially when it comes to multiple attackers. The biggest problem that we misperceive is that we think, especially as Kenpoists, that when it comes to the weapon techniques that we have, since you introduced and talked about the knife and or a club or anything else, that what we have been taught works. Because I promise you, ask Mr. Orsino, ask Max, ask anybody else who's trained in Filipino martial arts. You go to do an inner block, I promise you, I will do more damage to you in 5 seconds, what will take the world's best surgeon 5 hours to fix, if I have a knife in my hands. Because I know where to cut, how to cut, do it fast, precise, and you will bleed out in 2 minutes while I'm working on your partners. And that's reality. It's gruesome, it's horrible. But if it's you versus me going home to my daughter, guess who's gonna go home?
Let's go to Jerry Smith right now. Thank you, Derek. Jerry, you said earlier that you had dealings with, bar fights, Marines, servicemen that do not really want to go back with you. All righty. How do you deal with it when they all of a sudden they introduce a weapon against you?
Well, I think somebody said earlier, if a person pulls a weapon, I'm going to run. I'm going to get away. I'm not going to sit and try to fight a guy with a knife. It's ridiculous. I mean, if I can get away, I'll get away. The noted writer, and this is where mindset comes in. John Cochran, and a lot of you knew John Cochran. John Cochran and I started at Black Belt Magazine the same week. And I worked there for about 7 years, and John worked there even after I left. And I've trained some of the top full contact fighters in this country. And John would actually come down and work out with us and go through the John Cochran would. I don't know, hopefully most of you may know of John Cochran. He wrote more martial arts books probably than any other martial arts writer. Won the Funakoshi Award. But anyway, what I years later, because he lived here and he passed away. He lived here in Las Vegas. I asked him, I said, John, back in the day, they used to come down and go through all the exercise with the guys, all the workout. I said, why would you would never spar with me? He says, Jerry, he said, you want to know the truth? He goes, yeah. He goes, you don't spar. You don't spar. You have death matches. And he said, my idea of sparring is not having a death match with you. And we laughed about it. But that was my mindset from fighting in all those damn bars. I never, it still goes back to mindset. If a guy pull a knife on me, if I can run, I will run. I will save my life. If I'm in a bar and I'm fighting my way out, I'm going to grab anything that I can get. Pool cue, ball, anything I can get. I've done it before. And I don't think real fights should last very long, Chuck. I don't think real fights should be an hour and a half. I think real fights, you can, if you are committed and you know where to strike, you can end a fight really quick. Really, really quick. That was the time and I won't say who it is, but that was a professional bodybuilder, very famous professional bodybuilder, who slipped into an event with a friend of his, and these young kids who would work in the summer as urshas went over and asked him to leave, and he was giving the kid a hard no, because he was famous, and he thought, okay, this was right up my alley, because it was my job to apprehend and remove people. So I went over to the kids and I said, look, you guys, a guy and a gal and a young girl, I said, go ahead and leave. And I'm standing next over this guy. He's sitting down in a chair. I knew for him to move that much muscle mass to try to get out of the chair, he would have to actually put himself at a great disadvantage, because I would have broke his nose, taken an eye out, and called the paramedic. It would have been over very, very quick. It wouldn't have been it would not have been a long fight. So I looked down at the guy and I smiled at him. I said, look, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just going to ask you very calmly to get up and leave. And I said, leave. He looked at me with this little funny look on his face, and he got up and he left. Because I was not going to. There's no way on earth that he could have stopped me from hurting him. There's no way. He was too big.
Intense.
Yes.
Todd Durgan. Todd,
Yes, sir.
we've been dealing with this. You have explored Mr. Parker's writings in the Infinite Insights and expanded upon the web of knowledge, the planes, and etc. as we've discussed. What are your thoughts on applying some of those principles in a mass attack?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's right. First option is to run if that's your option. I think your first best option is either leave the scene. Second best option is to find the guy that you need to take out first and use him as a blockade. I think that was brought up until you can figure out a better scenario or better exit strategy. It's great to have one guy stab his buddy while you can, make a better angle of attack or opportunity to get to the guy with the knife. Just saying. As far as Mr. Hibbins correct also in that we often fool ourselves, or a lot of people have fooled themselves with regard to thinking that Kenpo has all of the answers, and it may have a lot of answers, but it doesn't have the answers without experience. It only has answers when you come back to it after you've experienced those other things, as in Kali Eskrima, Bikiti, some jiu-jitsu, some China, and those things. And then you can put the pieces back together, because Kenpo does have a tremendous amount of insight and information with regard to physics and mechanics and motion and how to deal with scenarios and preparation, both mental and physical. But experience, I know somebody said experience is the best thing that you can have, and that's it, experience. Ultimately, the best preparation is going to be to work your basics, grind the basics, because you are going to react with a basic, with either two back knuckles to the guys on either side of you or to that run. And that's what you get. You can study the universal pattern and on the 9 planes and laying on the ground and all that cool stuff all day long, but until you learn how to put them in action and they become second nature and they become spontaneous or extemporaneous, then none of that matters.
Thank you, Todd. Let's go to Chuck Sullivan. You're telling me it's not going to end up like the Quiet Man fight?
No, it's not going to roll all the way through town and inside, outside, have a drink in the meantime, and pat each other on the back until you smack each other in the face. And I love what the one gentleman said about Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until they get smashed in the face. That's true. That's why I advocate so strongly. You've got to be first. You absolutely have to take one of them out. How many of you right now, you guys, and you're about the toughest bunch of guys I know of, could actually stand a full-out ball kick under the groin that's going to lift you off the ground?
Oh
no. I have a 5.5-year-old that hit me in the nuts.
That
didn't go well.
That's right. Yeah. Did you cry?
You said cup check night. Those of you that are old school, my old man used to do cup check night, and if you weren't wearing a cup, you got it.
I don't want to even wear a cup. I've been hit wearing a cup already, and it's dastardly. It's
Yes,
bullshit. I mean, it's hard. It's like, my God, you get that feeling. I mean, you just want to puke. I mean, and if you might even do that. I'll give you an example. But there are times that you got to be able to come back. I was freestyling with Vic one night. And he got me. Boy, he got me. Now, if your wind is completely taken, you're done. When your wind is gone, you may have one shot left in you, but that's about it, because you're going down. You can't breathe in, you can't breathe out, And when they say your wind got knocked out, no, it doesn't. The muscles around your diaphragm is cinched up to the point where it doesn't work. And the only way it's going to return working is to relax down. And I'd grab their gi, the degree band, and I'd pull them up and down to pump air in them. And you know what that does? Nothing. But it makes them feel like somebody cares, and it relaxes them a little bit. That's the only I had. I actually started doing it to one guy, and he looked at me and he waited. He said, "Don't do that." Anyhow, there's where he got me so bad this one night, but he didn't drop me. I mean, I thought I was getting quarter breaths, then half breaths, and then finally I was getting whole breaths. And afterwards, I told him, I said, "You damn near dropped me." He says, "Really? You didn't show it?" I said, "You think I'm going to show that to you?" That's one of the things you got to be able to do. You got to be able to fight through it, because you are going to get hit. And the thing with a knife, somebody pulls a knife at me, guess what? I'm going to show him mine. I said, now we're going to have a knife fight. Now nobody wants to have a knife fight. They just want to cut you up. So I think about that side. We both just take it, 90 degrees and take off. I was in Florida one time, and we were walking through an area that was a little sketchy to me. So before we entered it, I took out my belt. Now this belt has got to weigh about 1.5 pounds. And on the buckle, if you'll see there, I don't know if you can see that, that's a Marine Corps emblem right there. And that's a heavy piece of stuff. And I had this thing wrapped around my hand with about this much hanging out. That gives me about 20 inches of reach that poor son of a bitch basically doesn't know I have. And when I hit him up alongside the head with this, he's going down. And when I do a figure eight and hit the other guy, so when I hit the other guy, I'm walking away. And somebody said something about dirty fighting. There is no such thing. Well, I'll put it this way. Mr. Parker described Kenpo as this: organized, scientific, dirty fighting. That was his description of Kenpo. And if you don't like that, leave the dojo.
It's funny you said that. You've been privy to some of the videos, the outtakes of my videos with Georgie. Georgie hit me in the nuts, and then he followed it up with a punch to the solar plex. So yes, you're down on your knees and you can't breathe. So it does work. Trust me, from a 5.5.
It works.
It was brutal. Let's go to Ed. Ed, how are you? Let's start introducing what you would do with the scenario around you. Are you looking for something to use as a weapon?
Oh, absolutely. If I can't run away, I want to know that I can get my hands on something, if possible. Sometimes you don't have time for that, and it might be there, but you can't get to it. But if you have the option, of course. Yeah, on dirty fighting, if a guy's 6'5" and he wants to beat me up, that's dirty fighting. So I reserve all right to kick him in the nuts. That's not dirty fighting. I mean, that's what we're in this game for, guys. To learn how to protect ourselves to the highest degree that you can learn. And that doesn't mean you're not going to get hurt, because you are going to get hurt. One other thing somebody mentioned about look at the big guy or look at the mouth. That's right. And Ed said to me one day at a lesson, he said, not only that, but you want to make the person you hit first scream so bad, everybody else stops for a while. Give them a second. Maybe you could take another one out. That means a lot. If you have that option, fighting is like stepping off a cliff. It's not over till you hit bottom to know if you're going to survive. And it's not about winning. It's about surviving.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Let's go to Darwin. Darwin, people have been talking about kicking him in the nuts or poking him in the eye. I mean, those are amazing targets that we can inflict a lot of pain. But, you can still recover from one of those two if it's not inflicted to seriously injure him. I say blow out his foundation. We do that all the time in Las Vegas when we implode our casinos. And when the foundation's taken out, it is not going to rise from the ashes. So if you blow out his leg and shatter a shin bone or a kneecap, and then as you continue on with other shots, I think those are very effective striking areas. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I definitely agree. You want to, the legs are the foundation from which they move in and out from. I commend the Muay Thai fighters. They use their knees and strike into the thighs. And a severe Charlie horse to one's thigh, you're not going to be very amble. You're not going to be moving around. So yes, I definitely think injuring, especially if with multiple attackers, you want to take the first guy down just immediately. You be the first one. You initiate the combat. And yeah, so yeah, disrupting their foundation, whether it be a sweep or a strike against their knee, definitely. Scoop kicks to the groin, groin kicks. Yeah, it all is very important. Yeah.
It could be either way. I mean, obviously you could strike his groin, but I say go for the legs because I have yet to see too many people know how to defend against a low kick to your shin area.
Definitely.
Except distance, grab distance, and that would be the same principle Wes Hibben would talk about when it comes to a knife being displayed, right, Wes? What am I going to create?
It's going to be a better issue in a lot of aspects. When I used to work on fishing boats out of Dutch Harbor. One of my brother-in-laws was a Tongan, and he used to like to get in fights in the bars there in Dutch Harbor. And I learned real quick, you don't ever punch him in the head because it's not going to do you any good. You kick him in the shins, the groin, the knee, he'll go down like a just drop. That's where he didn't have strength in there, but I could punch him in the head all day long and it didn't matter.
He can still chase you though, if you punched him in the head.
Yeah, but if I take out, if I hit the groin, if I hit the shins, all these things were much better contact for him than ever punching him in the head.
Well, I think if we talk about this, let's face it, if you want to run, if you take out his legs, he's not going to be able to chase you because he's laying on the ground holding on to that leg that's been snapped. And it's not going to take a lot to do that. Now, obviously, you can follow up when he goes to the ground. You can kick him in the head, kick him in the chest. You know, the old saying, you can't see, can't fight, can't breathe, can't fight, can't stand, can't fight. Except when you're dealing with Jerry, and Jerry working as a, MP, he has to use some kind of diplomacy because he can't just be killing everybody. I mean, he's got all these guys back.
Paul, I'll tell you something. The easiest fights I've ever had, and I've had a lot of fights, were against professional fighters. The hardest fights I've ever had was against people who had no skills. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. And I fought a boxer. I was given a class. And the captain asked me that Marine barracks, he said, Smitty, can you teach these guys, these MPs, how to use their nightstick? I said, of course. And I said, why? He said, because they're cracking skulls and, over at downtown Long Beach and we're getting sued. He said, teach them where to strike and and how to strike. So there was a guy, so I had all these Marines out on the lawn of the Marine barracks. I'm teaching them how to use their nightstick. And one of the guys, kind of tall, blonde guy, he was the naval-based boxing champion. And he was undefeated. And he was kind of looking at martial arts and this stuff. And he goes, oh, I hear you know that karate shit. I mean, that's what he said. It pissed me off. And I go, yeah. And he says, well, why don't you, fight me? And all the guys that were around, who I'm supposed to be teaching, oh, yeah, Smitty, come on, do something. Come on, let's see what would happen. And I go, I was kind of half crazy in those days, so I wanted to fight him. So I said, okay. So we squared off. He said, well, I've got something to tell you, man. He said, I'm going to be trying to knock you out, okay? And I said, all right, okay. The fight was over in 2 seconds. I did a fake front kick to a roundhouse kick and I broke his nose. Boom, he was out. I mean, now this is a professional fighter that had all these fights. He actually bent over Chuck to try to parry my kick. He actually he put his head down.
Yep.
And it wasn't, I didn't even have to kick head level. Broke his nose. He's out on the deck. And sometimes, because there are patterns. Professional fighters, I train professional fighters. They fight and they learn, but sometimes fighting a guy in the street who don't know anything, who throw punches from weird angles and have a point of view can be one of your toughest fights. I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you, Jerry. We appreciate it. Let's go to Derek. Derek, you have a question or a thought?
Yes, sir. First of all, want to hats off, salute to Mr. Smith. Thank you for your service. Something that I don't feel that has been touched on since I tuned in is, especially when you introduce a weapon, okay? And even what Mr. Smith touched on and Mr. Sullivan, other people have as well. You go up against a trained fighter, they have rules. And their muscle memory, their training goes by these rules. But you take our blocking system, this, that, or whatever, you put a weapon or a knife in a man's hands, he knows how to use it. So unless you know how to change this block to taking something on the outside of the arm, how to parry, check, tap drills, do all of these things and cross train, you will die, okay? This is experience. This is not hypothetical. This is not written in some manual. If you do not train like you fight and fight like you train, you will die.
Funny you said that. We actually opened up with all those things. and my scenario, Todd, where we have the professional boxer, the Gracie jiu-jitsu, the MMA, and then the street thug, the gangbanger that grew up on the back streets of the barrio. Out of the four, the first three have rules. The boxer knows how to use his hands, but he's not really familiar with kicks and he doesn't understand the ground. The jiu-jitsu individual waits to grab because that's when he can get his strength, but he's on the ground. But the problem is he just nullified his strength because there's two or three other people watching him. He's on the ground. They're going to jump on top like a football pylon. The MMA guy has a little bit of both, but he's also used to rules. He's fighting only one guy, and he has an official to make sure that his back is covered and nothing is affected. The only guy out of the, honestly, has the experience is the guy growing up in the barrio, the hood, that is used to going out there fighting for his life and doing bad things. And they end up usually in a prison, and then they're fighting their way out of that too. So they know the difference there. That's the big thing I think is there. So that's really important.
Have you ever seen a video, which I've been privileged to see, where gangs teach and show you where to stab, shank, cut, kill? You get stabbed in the kidney, you can't scream. You get cut here, you die. Unless you are trained in the Filipino martial arts or understand street fighting, if a man pulls a knife on you, it's for a reason. It's one of two things. One, intimidation. They think you're.
You went mute on us. You muted yourself,
Good
sir.
and well. What you can or can't do. So you have to be prepared to change your everyday inward block into taking something on the outside. Mr. Sullivan even said he went through a scenario, and this has been taught to anyone that's ever trained in Filipino martial arts. Grab a t-shirt, grab a belt, wrap it around, protect your vital organs, and strike first and strike hard, strike fast. Your dear son, who loves Cobra Kai,
He sure does.
talking about the Quicksilver method, okay? If a man can't stand, he can't fight. If he can't see, he can't fight. All the above. All rules go out the window, especially when a weapon is involved or multiple attackers, okay? We live by a creed, and most of us live by a principle, which is that of the warrior and the scholar come forth back to back. We can go through the boxer all we want, but the difference between the dragon and the tiger and what comes out is intent and what is given and presented in front of us. We have to react. We have to respond. We have to use muscle memory, our basics, and everything we've ever been taught in our life to survive the moment. And the only way to do that is experience and basics, basics, basics. You train like you fight like you train.
Going into Todd. Todd, you know, the scenario I gave in the hypothetical of the 4 guys, boxer, grappler, MMA, they all have to discard the rules because this is not a game anymore. The boxer's in a fighting, sporting situation. The grappler's also in a match, a sporting. You get to only a little bit closer to real life would be the MMA, but he's got covers there too. He's got rules. It's the last guy that we never hear about that shows up, and I'll say with his buddies, and he looks at Chuck Sullivan and said, "Hey man, what are you doing down here? Hey, you got any money on you?" And Chuck Sullivan's going to be saying, "Oh no, oh no, this is going to get ugly real quick. This Marine is going to go to DEFCON 5 in about a half a second."
So it's funny because one of my students used to do some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He did it for quite a while and kind of got ingrained on the ground to certain rules and things that he had to do to abide by this, you know, the training scenario. And so we were doing some groundwork one night, and I introduced him to a couple elbows to the lateral femoral cutaneous while he was in a full mount. And then I took him to I let him put me in a figure 4, what's it called? Sorry, I lost the term, where they wrap the legs around your neck and start squeezing. Anyway, so I had him go into that and let him get it on real good, and took a couple of swift back knuckles to the lateral femoral cutaneous. And the surprise after he screamed like a little girl and ran away, the surprise on his face was amazing because he hadn't put the two together. He hadn't gotten rid of the rules and the regulations that he was trying to abide by on the ground and in the ground game, and been introduced to the striking portion of that. The same goes with the boxer, the guy that got kicked in the face. You did the front kick to a roundhouse, got him in the face, probably on his way down. I did that in a tournament one time at the IKC, the internationals. Got a guy with a hooking heel. I came high with a hooking heel. He dropped his head. I rebounded into his face with a roundhouse kick, caught him in the face, snapped his head back, and he staggered back looking for his mouthpiece. But it was worth 2 points anyway.
How about the trophy? Did that go along with it too?
Yeah, no trophy. But the Street Fighter not having any rules is very important. I think one thing that hasn't been addressed too here is that, you know, when you get into these scenarios and you go up against somebody that you don't know what they have, and that's the important, you don't know what they have. So what is your best course of action? How do you read that person? What are the telltales? And are you trained enough and experienced enough to be able to tell what those telltales are and whether they have any experience in anything or not? That's where Mr. Sullivan, his first principle of fighting comes in: hit them first and run. Because if you get them first, then you don't have to worry about what they have or what they don't have, and you're on your way out the door.
You know what? The point you're making is hitting him first. Also remember, his buddies are thinking they have strength in numbers, and they feel they have the psychological advantage over you because they feel they can control you because there's 3 of them or 4 of them or 5, heaven forbid. you know, and like Derek was dealing with. But going back to one of the first comments I said, quoting in Lao Tzu, which is the best fighter is never angry. So to avoid yourself of the emotional aspect, I used to address this a lot of times. Take yourself from the neutral mindset to a concerned mindset to an angry mindset. Because usually when you're angry, you're very protective. You're more of the aggressor now, and you're meaning business. And with the odds stacked against you with multiple attackers, you need to send a message to them, right, Ed? You need to say, listen, okay, boom. And that guy's on the ground. The other two are going to say, holy crap, this guy's fighting back.
Absolutely.
Now, we don't know what they're going to do. They may pull out a knife. They might pull out a stick. They may scream, and there's also 10 more guys running down the alley at you.
If they, you know, if you got to take a person out, make them scream. Let everybody else get so, maybe I don't want to deal with this. Maybe, because most of the times bullies are people like who want to get one person. They're the cowards. They're not there. They don't want to get hurt. But don't ever underestimate the guy from the street, because he's more likely he's been in some fights. You know, he knows what it's like to get hit a few times. So, you know, that being able to take it is a big thing. The mind and what you're talking about, try to stay centered with all that. It's very hard to do. It takes a lot of training just to keep your head in the right place to deal with what you need to deal with. Because all that adrenaline's flowing, it might be dark and it's noisy. You got all these people and you're trying to take everything in. And the only way to do that really is to be calm. But it's not that easy. I mean, you don't really have to be calm. You have to have a heightened sense of everything that's going on around you. But it's still, nothing is written in stone. When it starts, it just unrolls. That's why, for me, I found the techniques, try to do a full technique is like wanting to get hurt. You know, let the basics come forward. You might get pieces of techniques, but let the basics come forward, because they're what's really going to save your life. I believe that firmly. But I mean, I'm talking about basics like eye pokes, leopard punch to the throat, those kinds of things, you know, slicing knife edge to across the knee. You know, I want, like Mr. Parker said, make a real impression when you do it to somebody, and sure they don't get back up.
Yeah, it's funny. Did you ever see Mr.
If
Parker?
he gets back up, he's more pissed off.
I'm going to ask a few of you, with your experience with Ed Parker. I know what my experience with it was for 12 years. Did you ever see Mr. Parker mad?
Oh, yeah, I have.
What was his demeanor?
He's the volcano. I had to walk up to him at an international and get some information for somebody. And as I'm walking up, whatever happened before I got to him, he went through the roof. And he was just, I never saw him. I turned around to the people and I said, you'll have to wait for a little bit. I don't want to go over there now, whether I'm the good guy or not, you know, that kind of juice. And not many people can come across with that.
How about you, Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I saw him really angry when he had written an article for Black Belt magazine. He had gone to the East Coast to officiate at a tournament, one of June Reed's tournaments. And he came back and he presented this article because I asked him to get the names of the winners. And he did. And he included it in an article, which he presented them, and they published it. But in the meantime, somebody had come along and changed a bunch of the winners. And they didn't have it accurate at all. Not at all. He had written it accurately, but they changed it. Somebody's nephew was there. He said, oh, no, he didn't win. So they went with the kid. Well, Ed Parker went down there. And I got to say, even just him describing it scared me, because he says, I didn't shave. I had on just a shirt. And of course, it's the flip-flops and khakis. And he said, I pounded on that desk so hard, I thought it was going to go down. How dare you do that? Put my name on your, and he said, he scared them so badly that for about 10 years, you never saw the name Ed Parker in Black Belt magazine, until finally the head regime changed over and they finally started publishing things about him in the internationals. But he got him back because Black Belt magazine ran a great big seminar and they had everybody in the world can be there. The only thing is they made one fatal mistake. And Ed Parker was the first to let them know what it was, because he was going to do a seminar on how to throw a tournament because he had the biggest and the best. He says, Chuck, they had this big blackboard. He said, I took the chalk. I said, M-E-E-E-R. Sex, exclamation. He said, I turned to him. I said, never, ever throw an event on a holiday weekend. Which is exactly what they did. He said, they all shrunk about half size, sitting down there in their blue suits and their red ties.
That's fun. You know, I saw Mauna Loa get upset a few times when that was his name in the movie To Kill the Golden Goose. And for those of you that, you know, for the most part, Mr. Parker would get very quiet at first before he became vocal. And you're like, oh God, oh, I don't want to be on the end of this. Slowly slinking out of the main office, and the door would gently close so that he could go off on whoever had his wrath. On the other hand, my teacher, who I love very much, Frank Trejo, very jovial man, but he would go to instant want to beat your ass to the ground, and he'd get really quiet, and he would just look at you like you have a second before you're dying, okay? And anybody knew him, and Derek and Wes know what I'm talking about. Chuck, you've been around him. You know, my guys that anybody that knew Frank Trejo knew that he wasn't talking. He wasn't negotiating. And honestly, even if he was in a tournament and he was playing with you, he would sober up real quick if he got hit and not got mad. And if you ever watch the international, you'll know what I'm talking about.
It was too late. If he talked to you, it was too late.
It was really not really a talk.
No.
It was like, huh. Yeah.
Not even that.
It was a grunt.
Stories of Uncle Frank at the Vagabond Hotel taking people over the rail into the pool and just beating them to a bloody pulp and like go on for days.
And that was Frank, just family members.
Yes. That's Uncle Frank the Tank. I mean, oh God.
We're having fun at Frank's expense. God bless you, Frank. You know, it's been 3 years since you passed away in April, and you're sorely missed. Your influence is immeasurable, and I'm very grateful for the friendship and the people I've met. And there's some beautiful people on here. Jerry, you knew Mr. Parker, but you generally got to talk to him when he was pleasant, correct?
Yes, absolutely. He would come up to the magazine, and he would usually come back to where I was working, and Mito would get, who owned Black Belt magazine, would get kind of upset because Mr. Parker, he was the most inquisitive man I think I've ever met, and you know, it had nothing to do with what he did. He wanted to know about how the magazine was designed, why I would flop a photograph, and I would explain to him what I was doing. And he would just stand there and ask me a bunch of questions about things. So one day, I think it was at the Elks Lodge. I don't know if a lot of you remember. I think Joe fought John Natividad. They were fighting on a stage. Bruce Lee was there. And I was kind of back up at the back of the auditorium, and Mr. Parker came by with that big voice of his, Chetty. I go, yes, sir, Mr. Parker. He goes, let me ask you a question. And I go, yeah. He goes, how you come to work at Black Belt magazine? I go, Mr. Parker, you want to know something really interesting? And he goes, yeah. I said, I'm from Louisiana. I'm a Gator baby. I was raised up in the swamps of Louisiana. I said, and it was segregated where we lived, a place called Streetport, Louisiana. We lived in a shotgun house. And across the street, there was a highway. Across the highway, there was an athletic club. It wasn't a dojo or school, it was an athletic club. And I was a little kid, 10 years old, sharp pants on, barefoot. And I'd get up on those garbage cans and I would look through the windows and I would see them working out, Chuck. They would be, you know, doing judo or karate, whatever they were doing. And I didn't know what it was. but I knew I wanted it. I wanted to do that. And that was the beginning of my quest. That was the beginning of my quest. And I said, Mr. Parker, you want to hear something interesting? He goes, yeah. I said, and he was just fat. We became like two kids. You know, once you got past, we were like, and he was saying, Jerry, what happened? What happened? I said, I went home one day after, you know, getting down off those garbage cans and running across the street and going inside. We had a little black and white TV. I said, you were on the TV. You, Nick Adams, and Joe Hines was on Art Linkletter's house party.
Oh,
and I said, you broke some board and did some technique. And I was just absolutely stunned. And I said, Mr. Parker, I was 10 years old. I saw that. And from that point on, I wanted to do that. I wanted to do it. And man, what did I tell him that for? He just opened up and was just like a kid. He goes, Jetty, come, let me tell you something. He says, look at these glasses I'm wearing where the nose comes. He goes, what does that say? I said, that says EP. He says, what do you think that stands for, Jerry? And they were gold, the glasses were gold. I said, I think they probably stand for Ed Parker. He goes, no, Jerry, it stands for Elvis Presley. Elvis gave me these, he showed me his glasses. Then he showed me a ring, a gold ring that had the EP on it. And he said, you know, Jerry, I'm an island boy. He said, but I think he was a Mormon, I think. I'm not sure, but I think he was. And he said, you know, I went to Brigham Young. He said, Jerry, I'm big. He goes, they were so prejudiced against me and where I went to school. And from that point on, whenever I went to, he would always invite me over to sit with him and his, you know, because I usually had people fighting and going around. But he was a wonderful, wonderful human being. So I had that's my very special memory with Ed Parker.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, for those of you that don't know about Jerry Smith, I want you to know about him. One, besides being one of the most influential individuals of teaching and full contact and whatnot, Mr. Smith is also a grandmaster. He was also one of the co-founders of the Black Karate Federation, better known as the BKF. And he's also a founder of the 5-level method, Shorinju Kenpo. So Mr. Smith is a very important person in our martial arts history. And we will be having a special interview with him very shortly, and you'll get to hear more about it. You know what, Jerry, thank you so much for coming on tonight. It really means a lot to these guys. And I wanted them to know a little bit about you before we close. So I'm going to close now. And in the closure, I'm going to ask each of you for your thoughts. And then we're going to go around the board here. And we're going to start first off with Chuck. What are your final thoughts on what we've talked about tonight?
I think everybody had some really fantastic things to say. And we all basically agreed. I don't think there was hardly a word of dissension among us. I mean, we all agreed on just about everything that was said. And the importance of freestyle, of course, is the fact that when you do it enough, and if you get on the street, it's just another freestyle fight, except now you can just go for it. Now you can let it all hang out and really just get down. You can do what you've been wanting to do all these matches for real, but it's just another fight. And if you never freestyle, think about the first time you ever freestyle. The nerves, the whole thing, the apprehension, oh my God, you know, am I going to live? The first time I saw two guys freestyle, I thought they were crazy. I thought they were nuts. They're banging shins. And this is, of course, back in the day. Yeah, this is back in the day when we had cups, and they were those crappy little things in a G-string practically. And other than that, we had no protective gear whatsoever. The two guys did a roundhouse kick at the same time and clanged their shins. I had knots on my shins for 20 years until I finally started putting pads on.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Todd Durgan. Your thoughts on today's discussion?
Well, I thought it was very, very good. It was a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Smith, Grandmaster Smith. Great to hear some of your stories too, as well as all the rest of you gentlemen. And I also appreciate Grandmaster Booz. I appreciate your input. I think that the big message here, though, is really just keep it real, and we got to keep it real, not movie real. And you know, the more experience you have, obviously, the better off you are. But if you don't have that experience. You know, seek out people that do. And if you seek people out, if you go through the trouble to seek people out, well, you know, at least take the time to listen to them.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate that. Let's go over to Ed Booz. Ed, great seeing you tonight. I love talking to you this past week. Thank you for your input. What are your final thoughts, sir?
Great being here, and I salute to everybody. My last thought is just like everybody else. You got to keep training. Got to try to make it as real as you can, at least in your head. You got to have the game face. Without attitude, pretty much most things are lost.
Thank you, Ed. I really appreciate it. Let's go. You know, Viran, we never really asked you any questions, but I hope that your participation in listening here tonight, what was your take on listening to all these gentlemen?
You know, to be very honest with you, I you know, didn't know everyone on the call, and I was just sitting here with my, you know, laptop open, and I just happened to pull up some of the names, and the fact that everyone shows up as the first search, I'm like, oh my goodness, I had no idea who everyone was on the call. So I just want to say thank you for letting me even be on here. This is just, I thank Senior Grandmaster Chuck for inviting me. Thank you. This has been a learning experience for me. And I think the thing I take away is this, it's more reaffirmation for everything I've known, I've heard, that I've trained with, to hear everyone from all these different backgrounds and everyone from all their perspectives, you know, Mr. Smith, from everybody, you know, who has experience. It's just, it's almost more reaffirmation, just gets, you know, the thing I took away, Paul, was just, you know, you get down to the point, you get down to business, you get it done. And just like, you know, Senior Grandmaster Chuck was saying, is just, it's, everyone's kind of saying the same thing, but from their perspective. That's what I took away.
The good thing about it, you are really with the roots of something, keeping it real with Chuck Sullivan. You know, that's one of the voices of Ed Parker, 19, early beginnings from the street to a school. And you know, you have an amazing opportunity to spend quality time with that man. Take advantage of it. These are what I call perfect Kenpo moments in your journey. It's your journey, and you'll find that to be the case. You know, Tim, you came on board tonight. You worked with Dave. What are your thoughts of this discussion?
Well, I'll tell you one thing about the martial arts that I love is that everyone I've trained with over the years, I've learned something from. From my first instructor, Doug Adamson, his instructor was Robert Trias, and his other instructor was Herb Johnson. Adamson's karate, to Gary Krim, Red Dragon and Tang Soo Do, to Dave Quenzel and Taekwondo, to Rick Barney, Rick's karate and Tang Soo Do. It's just whatever works for you is what works for you. There's no one right way or one wrong way. But the thing is, what I love about the martial arts is the camaraderie of it, the respect of it, and the Bushido code of it. It's like, I think I'm going to get into a fight with Grandmaster Sullivan, because yesterday when I met him in person, he wanted me to call him Chuck. And I said, no, I can't call you Chuck. You're a Grandmaster. You earned that title. So I'm always going to call him Grandmaster Sullivan, because it's a respect thing. But
we all love Chuck. We love Chuck. He is truly a Kenpo valuable jewel to our knowledge, and we're so happy he's here. He's the inspiration I hope to live as long as Chuck and do half the things he does. He's just an amazing. He's very genuine. He's very giving. He will spend quality time. Any one of these gentlemen that you're listening to tonight will tell you about Chuck Sullivan. He is the real deal. So with one last thing, I'm going to go to Derek. Derek, just in a word or two, tell us your thoughts so that we can close out this.
From the time that I've joined this tonight, my hat is off to you, Mr. Smith. Hoorah, Semper Fi. Every and anyone that has come before me, I will speak on behalf of my brother and my father, that the Hibben family, with the blessing of Mr. Parker, Lonnie Parker, may both of them rest in peace, that it is this platform in which we can talk, discuss, that we can do what we're doing right now. Well, Mr. Casey, okay? You're my brother. I can call you Paul on the phone, but on this platform, as was mentioned earlier, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Casey, Mr. Smith, Mr. Durgan, all the above. In the highest respect and highest honor and regard, thank you for allowing this platform for us to come together as a community, to come together to talk about things that in other times and days would be frowned upon. But we have this social network where we can communicate, we can talk about subjects, we can not only discuss principles, matters, real life situations, whether it be we're talking about the art of war, we're talking about Mr. Parker's books, we're talking about real life situations. Had it not been for you, Mr. Casey, my brother Paul, we would not have this platform in which we could discuss. So, that being said, from my heart, and I know that I speak on my brother's half, who's watching, my brother Wes, especially my father Gil, okay? My father Gil Hibben, who in my opinion has done as much, if not more, for the Kenpo community than anyone to promote our art and to show the world what we do.
Mhm.
On my behalf, on my family's behalf, thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Derek. We love your family. Well, all of us love the Hibbins. They're amazing, and we're very grateful that you represent your father well. And your brother, you know, he's very quiet on these platforms. But when I get him privately, guys, he's like a magpie. He's going off like this, and it's wonderful. So, the purpose of the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame is to do one thing: to bring this educational video series to the masses. We have over 10,000 views on our videos here because of people like yourself. And the contributions are immeasurable, and I'm grateful. So our goal was to bring the community together. That was what it was back in 2014, even though Frank laughed at me when I said that. The second thing was to return to Mr. Parker's thinking process of remembering we are a thinking martial arts.
Mhm.
We're not just instinctive. That will happen, but we think about it first, then we respond accordingly, which is devastating to whoever we engage with. And finally, the thing that you touched on, Derek, which is so important here, is the spirit. So the mind, the body, and the spirit of what we represent. And the respect here is obvious. So thank you very much, gentlemen. On behalf of the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame educational video series, thank you for your participation and salute.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, sir. God bless you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.